It's a Long Way to the Moon by Chris Tettrell Blay. On a dark, dark night, a little moth fluttered by, when the brightest of lights caught the little moth's eye. I must find my way up to that silvery ball, for its light is by far the prettiest of all.
Okay, so in this episode, I've finally, in this podcast, been able to wind my way through my my writing journey right up to current point, and finally getting a chance to talk about going over from the horror genre into a children's writing genre, which was raised a few eyebrows for me, because a lot of people were used to me writing about a lot of darker stuff, and then I decided to come out with this really cute rhyming picture book inspired by a lot of the stories that I was reading to my kids. And yeah, here I am, 2 years later. I've just released the second book called It's a Long Night for Santa, but last year was when my children's writing career, I suppose, really started to come together with the release of my first book, It's a Long Way to the Moon. And myself, a lot of people that have seen the book, read the book, heard about it, including myself, really know there's only one, or there's one main person who helped bring this book to life, because with a kids book, it's got to have a look to really pull you in. It's got to be illustrated in the right way, and there was only one person really, to me, that I wanted to have on the show to help get his side of things really on what the process was like, and that is finally getting to talk to the man behind the Moth, really, Greg Carter. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Hello.
Thank you for coming on. This is really, I should have done this a lot earlier, really. I think I was meant to try and arrange something like this when we released the first one. But first off, I can't thank you enough for the work that you put into my books. We'll talk about them in a bit more depth in a bit, but I just wanted to kick off, really. It's amazing how you kind of crept into my head without us actually either meeting, talking, or whatever. You absolutely nailed the vision I had for those stories. But sort of kicking off, just tell us a little bit about yourself in terms of sort of who you are, where you are, what you've done up to this point, I guess.
I've always had an interest in drawing as a child, and was encouraged to do that quite a lot. So I just followed that interest through my life, basically.
Cool.
I've done like commission pieces for a long time, but it's never really been anything serious.
No.
And it wasn't until I worked at a publisher's that I then kind of made it, sort of broke into the illustration world.
Okay.
And so that's kind of how I got to illustrating books.
Cool. What sort of stuff have you done besides, like I say, we'll get to my book specifically, but have you done children's books or books before, or had you been involved in any other kind of visual graphic kind of art?
Similar to yourself, my where I'm comfortable creating stuff is in horror. So
Okay.
I've drawn lots of monsters and just created a lot of horrible things. I was in bands as a teenager quite a lot, and they were all kind of like death metal bands or grindcore, and they were like really silly songs, silly lyrics about really hideous things. So that was like fun horror.
Yeah.
I've done like a lot of video projections, sort of in clubs and at parties and raves, I guess. Which is so I've got a very strong interest in like audio things reacting to audio.
Yeah.
So I'm currently studying a master's in computer game art, where
Wow.
I'm I'm basically making a computer game that you play music to, and then the computer game changes dependent on what music you're playing to.
Oh wow,
So,
okay.
Yeah,
That sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, I like creating stuff. I like making things. Yeah,
That's cool. With your horror interest and your metal interest, now it sounds like we could have a whole other discussion another
yeah,
time,
right.
because that's my that's very much follows my creative side, I suppose. When I led into the writing, it was very much inspired by horror games, horror movies that I was a fan of, that I was watching and playing at the time, and being a metal fan for a number of years, it really, that's what conjures up those sort of images, and it led to like 5 books in the end, thinking down that
Yeah,
road. So it's cool talking to someone whose mind kind of works the same. And I've always been quite envious, really, of anyone who's worked in the visual arts front, because I may, some people may not like what I write down, but I kind of like express myself best, through words. I've always wanted to be able to conjure something up on paper or on the screen, from a visual perspective. And I've never really been able to train my mind to get the images that I see in my head onto paper or onto a screen. If you've got a certain process that when you've got a project, whatever it is, do you have a certain process that you follow, or do you just kind of go with whatever's coming to you at the time? Are you quite strict with it?
It's a lot of going with the flow of seeing what happens.
Yeah.
Creating things. Writing is kind of like drawing a picture, except the picture just exists inside someone's head in a way. So you are and yeah, so like how you use your words would decides how good that picture is inside someone's imagination. So,
I suppose so.
But I sometimes the things I make, I just start making something and it happens, and then it's there at the end, and not much effort has gone into it. Other times I plan stuff through and have to try something and it won't work, and then I'll have to go back a few steps and then try again.
Yeah. Are you quite a perfectionist when you work into it, or are you quite happy to sort of leave a project, say wasn't quite what I had in mind, but I'm happy with that at the end? Or do you just
a lot of times when it's gone well, that's what it's going to have to be, because I can't make it what it. But sometimes you get nice surprises like that of something that you didn't expect, and also like working with limitations sometimes also has some sort of interesting outcomes sometimes.
Yeah. So moving on, I suppose, to the reason, the main reason why I'm sort of bringing you on is it's probably go back about 3 years ago. I had this image popped into my head. There wasn't much planning behind it. I've told a number of people sort of locally the reason why I wrote It's a Long Way to the Moon. It was just, there was a moth fluttering around a light bulb in my lounge, and I was kind of just shooing it out out the door, and it managed to go out the door, and I just happened to look up, and it was a full moon, and I just said to my wife, do you ever think there's a moth out there who confuses the moon with a light bulb and decides he wants to fly up to it? No, I had the intention, I suppose, eventually of writing a kid's book, but that moment was when that idea started, and I just kind of over a few weeks I put a few lines together and and turned it into what it was. When did you first become made aware of my book? What were your thoughts when you were approached as a possible project to illustrate it?
The thing that sort of latched onto the most, I guess, from was the reference to Very Hungry Caterpillar in that's the kind of style that you wanted it in. And so I read that book as a child, so that's the imagery in that book's kind of imprinted in my brain.
Cool.
And that kind of style it translates really well to working in Photoshop,
Yeah.
because the illustrations in Very Hungry Caterpillar are kind of like, they're sort of coloured shapes with a texture on them,
Yeah.
which that translates very well to Photoshop, in that you can, but being Photoshop, you can take it to the extreme compared to what was happening in A Very Hungry Caterpillar. So.
I like it. When I first got the first, almost like the very first, almost like test proof or something of one of the images, and I saw the moth. And again, with all of my books, it plays out like you said. You know, we write a book, you have an image in your head that you're trying to put down, and all I had said to the guys was, yeah, visually, I just wanted something quite simple, you know, along the lines of Hungry Caterpillar, but I didn't know what I was going to get back that first time. I thought, for one, that it was going to be a lot more sort of back and forth, trying to shape it and having a lot more input in it. But when I got back that first effort from yourself, that was it. I knew, okay, I don't really have to do much else with this. I'm very happy for this guy to kind of, you know, show me what he's drawing for my story. Was it a project that you worked? I appreciate you probably had other things that you were doing sort of in between. Sort of what was your process in terms of moving in between your projects at that point? Because correct me if I'm wrong, but some of the images that I've seen on your social media, and like you said, the kind of things that you were doing, this was a little different to a lot of stuff that you've done before. So yeah, how did you move in between the sort of the very different feel of
the stuff I make personally to just like to please myself, the thing, just so I want to make it, it's basically horrible. I like horrible things, so that's the kind of the things I make. So I know if I'm creating something for someone else, I'm making it for them. It's not for me. So I need to. I go from the input that I'm given but then I have to try to imagine what that person is imagining. I guess. Yeah.
Get into someone else's head.
Yeah.
I find it, I struggle sometimes getting into my own, let alone trying to sort of, you know, take someone else's ideas. So it's a real talent, I think.
Well, it also shows how, like, the image that had been created inside my mind from reading your illustration, from your text, that obviously created something similar to what you were already thinking. It's like there's probably like some kind of deep psychological thing going on that we, as a human, we can't ever understand how things influence each other.
I don't. Yeah, I probably don't even want to spend too much time sort of thinking about that. You can probably go down a few rabbit holes with that sort of thing. You know, why I'd like to get inside some other children's authors' heads and try to figure out what it was that they were thinking when they came up with some of these stories. You know, because I think a lot of them are there to please the adults as much as the kids.
Yeah, but definitely with children's movies, there's so much going on that's there for the adults who are watching the film.
We got to be subjected to it as well. You know, like second time around, you may have seen it as a kid, but when you watch it again as an adult with your kids, you're picking up on stuff they don't. Always there's that barrier, there's that thin veil there, which so
they're like I was gonna say cartoons like Adventure Time kind of do that really well, in that there's a very weird, surreal world going on top of that cartoon. That's kind of, if you don't actually sit down and watch it, you don't notice it. But if you like pay attention, it's just like, what is going on in this cartoon?
Who knows? Was there any kind of childhood influences? You mentioned that you were a fan of The Hungry Caterpillar as well. And like myself, was there any other influences from your memories or whatever as a child, which kind of went into what you conjured up for those books?
I think I was exposed to like quite a lot of sort of Japanese animation and illustration. Things like Thundercats and Ulysses. That's all in. I'm not actually sure if it is Japanese, but it's in that kind of style. Yeah. And I was really into computer games, so the artwork of Mario and Sonic was quite a big influence on me. But then as I got a bit old, like really 80s horror was like Hellraiser films, a lot of the Cronenberg films. Like I kind of really enjoyed like the sort of body shock sort of stuff.
Sounds like we've really kind of lived in like pretty much a parallel
right.
Exactly the same things. You must be. How old are you, by the way?
I'm 39.
Okay, yeah, similar kind of age bracket. So so very much into the same things. One of my books that I wrote, one of the highest bits of praise I received for it was that it reminded someone of Clive Barker.
Yeah, right. Nice.
Very much, because I was a big Hellraiser fan as well. So that was, I'll take that one. So
that's
I
a
know
good
exactly what you mean. So I was blown away with the first one when the product that you helped create with It's a Long Way to the Moon. So I decided it needed a second book. I had no qualms about how I wanted to go. I could only really do it if the publisher was happy to take it on, and obviously have yourself to work on it again, because I couldn't really imagine it being done by anybody else. What were your thoughts then when It's a Long Night for Santa came across your desk? Is Christmas a sort of do you have again a childhood pull when it comes to Christmas?
As an adult, I'm so uninterested in Christmas. It's just an event that needs to happen. As a kid, it was just fun staying at home playing with toys. That's what Christmas is all about to me.
Absolutely.
And just being at home with family and stuff. I guess that's what, I wasn't at school. That was a good thing. Yeah. It was sort of is the word was it a juxtaposition in that I was drawing Christmas pictures in the middle of summer.
I was
doing a lot of snowy pictures, and it was boiling hot outside. So it was like a strange contrast.
It is. I guess it gave you somewhere else that you could disappear to. I suppose books are supposed to take you off to other places, and it
helped me cool me down a bit. So I've lost track where I was going.
Don't worry, that's fine. Now, was there any particular things that when you read the story for the first time, did anything spring out immediately? A bit like any ideas that you had for the first one? Was there any sort of visual ideas that came to you straight away that you knew this book needed?
I think so. The first few opening images were very clear in my mind, because it was kind of that foggy, snowy scene where it was all kind of a bit mysterious, and so I guess that the image needed to have space for people to imagine what was out there rather than to actually show what was there. I did think that it would how much difference including humans would have to the book, because it was all animals in the first book.
It was,
and because I really kind of like the idea of sort of animals having this there's like they have their own society or like culture going on that we're completely unaware of, because we can't speak their language. So
if we could,
maybe
not.
They probably wouldn't say very nice things to us.
Probably not. No. It's best to leave them unheard.
So.
It's the actual. This is one bit that really fascinates me about this is is how you actually create. So take my books, I guess, as an example, since we are talking about them. So the process, the physical process of putting together an image, you say you use Photoshop, or largely use Photoshop. How long, how much work went into, say, just one illustration, like as a double, what we use as a double spread? How long would that have taken you to put together?
So I guess it worked out quite well for the illustrations I did for the Moth books, because you were so pleased with them that it did, like that some people it's kind of it is a lot of back and forth of like just changing small details, or that the client doesn't quite know what they want in the first place, which takes a while to then try and figure out what is needed then. So I kind of like to do it in stages, in that I did like some very simple sketches to begin with, which was kind of just to show what was going to be in the picture and how it was going to be laid out. Because if I sort of went and did the whole thing and then there was big changes in layout, then that's a lot of sort of going backwards, like, and then reworking a lot of things. So but I guess if I sat down in an evening to work on it, one picture was 2 evenings work.
Okay.
So
puts it in perspective.
Yeah.
So to actually get, because I really enjoyed getting the line sketches, you know, even from those I could sort of tell where it was going and that we were on the right page. So physically getting from the line sketch to what you can see on the page, I mean, do you just fill it by color? Do you actually have to like put the fine detail in? Sort of what is the actual process of then getting the final colored sort of version?
So from the sketch, I would sort of kind of a little bit like watercolor, kind of do a background wash kind of thing, but it doesn't, because it's on the computer, it could be as vivid as you want. It doesn't, you don't have to worry about making it faint like a watercolor, because then you can, because Photoshop lets you work in layers, so you can so it's like having loads of sheets of acetate on top of each other, and you can then put stuff onto those layers and then rearrange those layers, as in, like, so say that the moth would have been in like a separate layer, and that layer could have had a whole group of stuff inside that layer, which, so it would be built up of sort of its basic shapes, which were just like a solid base color, and then on top of those basic shapes, photos of textures were added, and they were manipulated to fit the shape that it was being added to. And then you can so the layers can have blending modes, so you can change how the layer underneath shows through. So changing the blending mode allowed the bottom base color to show through. And then on top of those layers, I would do like shading. It was just using a sort of a darker color on a low opacity to slowly build up where the shadow would be, and then did the same but with highlights. And so that's kind of the moth then by itself as a separate entity. And then it was the kind of then do the same with a house or with Santa. And then you can manipulate those things, so it was easier to reposition things if it needed slight changing. And then on top of all of that, I sort of did the color processing, which kind of brought it all together, like adjusting the levels, color correction, and sort of brightness and contrast, and that, which kind of ties all of the individual things. It just brings them together better.
Okay. Wow. So anyone really out there who thinks that because nowadays art, or visual art such as this, is mostly done on a computer, and I would say anyone can have a go at it, but anyone that thinks it's an easy thing to do, you've basically just proved them otherwise, because that, you know, that to me, that's a lot of work going into just one or two images that are only part of the final composition. You know, it's
Yeah, right. I I think a lot. I guess it depends how sort of original you want your creation to be, or like bespoke in a way.
yeah,
There's plenty of free assets available to download. Like you've got like websites like Free Pick and things like that, where there's just tons of assets you could download, take individual elements, recreate them, and create your own thing. But it just has that feeling that it looks like everything
the
else.
original. Yeah.
Yeah.
How did you get into actually using the? Because I guess sort of going back to school, was art your big thing when you were at school and through college and that, or was it just something you did on the side? Yeah.
Yeah, art and music.
Yeah.
I sort of didn't like things like maths. It's only as I got older and started getting into coding and programming that I've realised,
Yeah.
oh, like maths is really useful actually. So,
Yeah.
but,
So starting out, I guess when you're at school, a lot of, you know, paper, pencil, paint, you know, physical
oh
art
yeah,
in that
yeah.
sense. So what would you do? You prefer, or do you prefer working with the computer based sort of illustrations and you know, graphic design that you're using nowadays, or do you yearn to go back to, you know, paper and pencil and that at some point?
I really like digital because you have undo to start off with,
Yeah, well,
which is
yeah.
really helpful.
It's a great tool for a writer, that, rather
Yeah.
than use Tipex. So
Yeah. And yeah, the amount of stuff you can achieve in a much shorter amount of time is like much quicker on a digital, but it never really exists. It
yeah,
only exists as data inside a computer unless you get stuff printed out or 3D
yeah,
printed. It's never actually in reality. So that's one. There was a lot of some pictures I like to completely sketch out on paper first and then scan that in and then work from the sketch that's been done on paper.
okay,
And some stuff I like to actually ink it using fine liners, and then I quite like to scan them in and then vectorize them in Illustrator, and you
okay,
can sort of really you can make it massive then without losing any quality.
yeah,
But that's much more. I had just put a lot more time into stuff that exists on paper. Takes much more time.
yeah. That's fair. So me selflessly stepping aside. So what else are you sort of working on now? What does the future, the sort of short-term future hold for you? What have you got going on?
So I'm mainly into sort of computer game stuff at the moment.
Yeah.
Like so I just finished a degree in computer game art, and I'm now sort of a 3 months into a master's of computer game art, which so the project I'm working on at the moment is I basically kind of made this goblin that when you play music to it, it reacts but it hates the music, so it kind of runs around and punches itself in the face and headbutts the floor and things. And after playing it so much music, it basically eventually just lies down and gives up and never gets up again. So I want to turn that into a game basically, and the idea of the game would be that you play the goblin music, but you have to interact with it at the same time to keep it alive.
Got you. Okay.
So that's where I'm at the moment.
Like a new version of Tamagotchis sort of thing.
Yeah. A horrible version of Tamagotchis. Yeah.
That's awesome. No, that sounds brilliant. So I mean, sort of career-wise, when you see you've completed your master in that, where's your dream career?
I quite like the idea of sitting at home and making stuff on the computer and getting like I'd be quite pleased myself if I managed to make a game that people wanted to play.
Yeah,
That would
That'd be amazing. And you know,
Yeah.
current times, you know, working from home and that the possibilities are endless anyway with stuff like that. So yeah, that's
Yeah,
that.
yeah. We
That
live in a digital world now.
absolutely, yeah. And
Yeah.
it's for for a lot of us. I work from home as well myself, and you know, I can see how it's benefiting a lot of organisations. So yeah, no, fair play, mate.
Yeah, definitely.
I'll be keeping an eye on that, and if that, or if and when that does make it to market, I'll be there. That's
Nice.
definitely appealing to me, mate. Definitely appealing to me. So no, I
Good
mean,
stuff.
I got to thank you again, not only for the work that you've put in, you know, the books, the Moth books are probably my, even growing up as a horror and a heavy metal fan, um the books that you've done are my proudest achievement as a writer. You know, they're two products that I really look at, and I think if I did nothing else, I'm really happy with what I can show. And no, that's a massive part because of yourself. You know, the one thing I always get comments on is the look of it. You know, people love it. You know, it's giving that classic feel that people are wanting to pass on. I think we're all from the same generation where we had that, and we want to pass that on now to the next generation. So no, thank you for that. Thank you for coming on. I've had a blast talking to you finally.
Yeah.
So
It's so really good to hear about the book, and thank you.
no, no problem at all.
I
No,
enjoyed working on it.
you never know if there's another one. There's not another one in the works my end at the moment, but if there is, you know, I will definitely be keen to work with you again, because I think you've really given it an identity that I would need to keep, you know, for any
Great.
subsequent book.
Nice
So,
one. Great.
yeah.
Thanks.
So before we go, just sort of giving you the floor for a couple of minutes, really. Is there anywhere that people can sort of keep up with yourself, what you're doing, sort of on social media or whatever?
Yeah, if you Greg Carter visual artist, if you Google that or Facebook that or Instagram that, yeah, yeah, one of those. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, brilliant. Well, I urge everyone to check you out, because you're, you know, the books you've done for me are out there. I'm sharing them all the time. People that follow me will be quite familiar with your work in that sense, but I think definitely what I see of your other stuff is definitely worth checking out. And you know, pop a
Thank
follow
you.
on there.
Thanks.
No worries. Thank you again, mate. I wish you all the best. Have a great Christmas,
And
New
you.
Year, and everything. And you know, hopefully keep in touch and work together again.
Nice one. Great. Thank you.
No worries. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to like, share, and hit the subscribe button. Also follow us on Facebook and Instagram to keep updated about all future shows.